I just want to start off by, let's open in a word of prayer, actually. Can you guys just bow your heads and pray with me? Lord, I just thank you so much for an opportunity to just share from my heart and hear from your word. God, would you just be with us now and speak through me and speak to these students? God, may we all see that what we need to do most this year is grow closer to you and honor you with our lives. God, may we leave our brokenness and the parts of our lives that are in flux or in need of fix. And God, may we just put them at your feet and say, Lord, here am I, use me, and continue to do the good work in me, Lord. And may we not grow weary of doing what is good, even in the face of adversity and heartbreak. But God, may we strive to continue to honor you even when things don't go our way. So God, I just pray that you would bless these students and that this year our club would just grow closer together and grow in a way that would honor you. I pray this now in the name of Jesus. Amen. You know, I had originally planned for this opening devotion to be, an inspiring message about making the most of 2015 and, a real hurrah kind of message, if you will. But I'm not going to do that. Instead, as I've always tried to do, is I'm going to just be real with you guys and be honest with you and just let you know what I've kind of been going through a little bit, and I hope it will be relevant to you as well and will be a source of encouragement in your life.
Before we start there, you did send this to all the Valor members as well as your other list, right?
I believe so. Why don't you email it out just to make sure? Cool. So what I was saying is, the topic I want to talk with you guys tonight is on surviving brokenheartedness. Have any of you ever been brokenhearted before? Anybody? Yes, a couple of the parents, I'm sure. I don't know, like maybe you've been brokenhearted because your favorite pet died. Anyone have that happen? Maybe you've been brokenhearted because one of your favorite grandparent or some, a cousin or someone maybe has passed away. And I don't know if you've experienced that. And maybe you've been brokenhearted because you've been in a relationship that just went south. And let me just tell you that living long enough, the longer you live, I can guarantee you, at some point in your life, if you haven't experienced this already, it's going to happen. It's not a question of if it will happen, it's a question of when. That in this life, the one thing we're guaranteed of is that we're going to have trouble and there's going to be difficulty. And the question isn't going to be whether or not those things are going to happen, but the question really is, how are you going to handle it when it happens? Does that make sense? And while I hope that, you guys don't have to endure too much brokenheartedness in your life, but the truth is, we all go through it. And if you've read the story of Job, how many of you read the story of Job? We know that it's not, necessarily like God being upset at us or God's judgment, against us when we go through times of brokenheartedness. Sometimes it's that we're really trying to do things the right way. I mean, Job was a man honoring God with his life. He had made a covenant with his eyes to be pure. And in all of his ways, he was blameless. His friends had no specific allegations against him. Even though they tried for like 20 plus chapters to nail him on something, they couldn't find a single thing to nail Job on. And yet, he suffered some of the worst brokenheartedness you can ever imagine. I mean, not only did he lose his wealth and his health, all of his children were killed in a single day. I mean, children that I'm sure he loved, with all his heart. Children that he, I'm sure, thought would outlive him. And yet, the reality was for Job, as it is often for us, that life sometimes throws us a curveball. It throws us things that we weren't expecting to happen. And when those times come, the question of your faith is going to be tested. Because what you really believe isn't what happens in times of comfort and ease. No, it's what happens to you in the way you respond to it in times of pain and adversity. That's where we're going to really see what kind of Christian you really are. Because that's where the true you is being tested and the nature of who you are will shine forth. And this is why when Jesus gives this analogy about the builders who built their houses on different foundations, right? There's the house that's been built on the rock of God and in the truth of God, and then there's a house that's been built on the sand. And then as the storms come and it comes against both houses, the result though is totally different. The house on the sand collapses with a great crash. But the house built on the rock of Christ and the rock of His Word, it withstands the storm. And so my question to you tonight is going to be really, where is your foundation? And if it's not in having a real relationship with Christ, then let me tell you, it's only a matter of time before the difficulties of life come into your life and bring your house crashing down. And one of the reasons why we see over 68% of Christian high school students who go off to college and leave their faith is because they didn't really have a real foundation in faith to begin with. And if you're really serious when you say tonight to me, if you're going to say, hey, I'm a Christian, what that means and what it should mean to us is that we have a firm foundation in who we are in Christ and our identity is in Him. And so I don't know what brokenheartedness you may have had in your own life, but I know in my own life I've had my share. And maybe, if I dare say, more than my share, if I can be so bold. One such brokenheartedness experience happened to me over this Christmas break. And let me tell you, let me tell you this. The thing that makes brokenheartedness so rough, so harsh, is that it's really, you have put your heart into something, your hopes into something, and if you've truly loved them, and I don't know, I mean, I doubt, I don't know how many of you have had like the whole boyfriend-girlfriend experience yet, but once you've been there, and once you're at a stage where you're like, hey, I'm at a stage where I'm ready to be married, you know what I'm saying? And you're really invested in a relationship, and it doesn't work out for whatever reason. It wasn't like something bad happened in this recent situation that I went through, but it happened. And the reality is, whether I like it or not, it's over. You know, and what you do in result of that, how you handle that, is what's really going to show your faith. And the truth is, there's no way to avoid this. I mean, I don't care if you want to do courtship or whatever methodology that you use. If you truly love someone and you invest yourself in that relationship, and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, well, you're gonna experience pain, and there's no way to avoid it. And we as humans, we want to avoid things that cause us pain. We are very like, I don't want pain. But the truth, listen to me, my friends, there's just no way around it. And so when you have those moments of pain, and when those times of pain come into your life, I hope that you'll handle it. Hope you'll handle that pain as I'm trying to. And that's to give it to Christ. And so I wanted to share with you guys just a few things that have helped me, and I hope it will help you. And that as you go forth in your lives, you know, and you guys go your different directions, and the time of brokenheartedness comes, I hope that you're willing to invest some time into what I'm telling you tonight, because I think it can help you as well. And the passage I wanted to share with you is just a couple. One is from Psalms 144, and it's 147, and it's verse 3. Psalms 147, verse 3 says this: He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. It's talking about God. Jumping back a verse, it says, the Lord builds up Jerusalem and He gathers the outcast of Israel. And then it says, He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. You know, the people of Jerusalem, the Jews, they've experienced a lot of heartbreak throughout their history. It's been said they're the only people on the face of the earth who have had their homeland ripped away and then actually came back and reformed their nation. And has had thousands of years in between the time that they've owned the same geographical landscape. And yet, throughout all of their heartbreak, the one thing we see that's consistent with the Jewish people is a God that loves them and has continued to pursue them even when they rejected Him. And so I think for me, and what I want to share with you tonight, is that by having a real relationship with Christ, you can at least have something that the rest of the world can't give you. And that's a comfort that is found in Him. And so I want to just encourage you with 3 things that I have found that helps me in times of brokenheartedness. And I hope they'll help you too. Number 1 is just to take time to pray and read God's Word. To take time to pray and read God's Word. You know, there's something about just being honest with God and just saying, hey, I'm really hurt. You know, this stinks. You know, this sucks. This is a terrible thing to go through. I think being real is what you see Job was when he handled his pain and his suffering. He cried out to God. He wanted to know why. And I don't think it's wrong for us to ask God, why is this happening to me? Why does this happen? Right? But what's important is that we do take it to Him and that we continue to pursue Him despite the setbacks and disappointments of life. Number 2 is what I'll just simply call chocolate brownies. I don't know, they seem to work pretty well for me. I'm just going to throw those out there. Chocolate brownies, have at it. And number 3, and this is one I certainly put into practice this last weekend, is be around those you love. Be around those you love. Because the worst thing to do when you're brokenhearted is to suffer through that alone. So find brothers and sisters in Christ, family members, people that love you and you love them, and spend time with those people. And I'll tell you, there's something healing that God has equipped the body of church, you know, His body, His bride, and able to handle those times of disappointment and setback in life. And so what I want to just encourage you guys with, it was just an honest, real, brutally honest Griffith Vertican who is telling you that, man, my life, it's not easy. It's not always roses. And as excited as I am, and as excited as I was, you know, I also want to be honest and real with you guys and say, man, I go through times of disappointment too. And I go through times of real pain and heartache too. And what this last relationship showed me is just, man, how you know, heartbreak can happen even when you don't expect it to. And when that does, I just pray that you guys will handle it as I'm striving to handle it. And that's to give it over to Christ and continue to pursue Him. Amen? Will you pray with me? So God, I just thank you for this brief devotion. God, I pray that it would be a message that would encourage these young people, that in times of disappointment and brokenheartedness in this life, God, that we're bound to experience, God, that we would not deal with our pain in an unhealthy way and just try to keep it in or go to a substance or something else to try to cope with that pain. But God, instead, we would just be real with you and seek your word and seek your face and spend time in prayer and spend time with people that love us. God, I just pray that we would take your word to heart, that you are the God who heals the brokenhearted, that you heal our wounds. God, that you are close to the brokenhearted, and that you are the God who love those who suffer. God, you say, blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. So God, we just want to be real with you tonight and say, God, sometimes we don't understand your plan. We don't understand your will. But God, we want to just continue to be submitted to it. And we want to commit and just humbly come to you, God, that even in times of difficulty, even in times of uncertainty, disappointment, and heartbreak, God, that we could just find healing in you. So Lord, would you remind these young people of that truth, that they might build their houses on the rock of your word, so that they can withstand the heartbreaks and storms of life. I pray your blessing on them now, in the name of Jesus. Amen. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to dismiss all of the students who have competed for more than 1 year. If that's you, if you've competed 1 year or more, you're going to go out those doors, and Luke and Manoah are going to meet with you guys in different rooms, and you will be working on your debate cases and things with them in those rooms.
Really quick announcement. Hey, before everyone leaves.
Quick announcement by Brandon Winchell. Need that? Go ahead.
That's cool. I'll just take this. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to start off the second year with you all, too. Unfortunately, before I can start out the fun, we have to start out with the business arrangements. Specifically, who remembers the assignment that you all were given before we split up last time for my TP students? Finish the 1AC. What were the requirements for that? The assignments were a 1AC, a completed 1AC that had a minimum of 8 affirmative cards, and an affirmative backup that had a minimum of 15 affirmative cards. And I stated that those who did not get that done ASAP would not be able to compete at the Point Loma debate tournament. So far, I have only had one team, and that is Jasmine, have her case cleared with myself and made sure that she met the minimum requirements. I have not received any emails from anybody else, so here's the deal. By tomorrow night at 5 o'clock, if Luke, who is in charge of the TP evidence, or I do not receive a case from you that has a minimum of 8 cards with an affirmative backup of 15 cards by tomorrow night at 5 p.m., unfortunately, as much as I hate to do this, you will not be allowed to compete at the Point Loma Nazarene debate tournament. So, submit the evidence cards by 5 o'clock tomorrow. You had all Christmas break. By the way, you can cut an evidence card in under 10 minutes. So when I say do a 1AC with 8 evidence cards plus a backup of 15, that's practically, what is that, 23? 23 evidence cards split between you and your partner. That shouldn't take you more than a couple, maybe 3 hours if you put in all the time just doing it. So that's all I'm asking of you, and I'm doing this for your own good because I'd rather you not go to the tournament and have a weak case get defeated than for you to give out a case idea and lose constantly because it's not a strong case with strong backup evidence. So make sure that you see Manoa and I and get those cases in by tomorrow at 5 p.m.
Oh, Rachel, those handouts are only meant for the first-year students. So, and they're three pages each. 3 pages each. So you're in here. Hey, Nick, you're in here. Stay in here. First-year student. Yeah. 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 I might have got it, but I'm fairly certain I checked all my emails and I don't remember taking one. Rachel, can you tell Nick and Nick, where's your part? Okay, yeah. Come on in, guys. And did you get the 3 pages? Come on up. Come on up front. Yeah.
Somebody took my page back.
Okay. All right, let's get started. Can you guys?
Okay, cool. Give me the latest version of it.
Cool.
Wait, I have it.
Can you guys talk about it more later?
No, yeah, we're good. We're good.
Good. And the stream and everything's going good? Are we good to go? Okay.
So it's 3 different cards, 3 different pages.
15 evidence cards in the back.
Yeah, but like these pages, 3 pages.
Okay, let's get started.
I don't know.
Yeah. So you guys shut that door right there for me and we'll jump on into this. Where's your partner at, Nick?
I don't know where he went.
Can you go grab him real quick? Run and grab him? Yeah. All right, so tonight what we're doing is the fundamentals of debate. The fundamentals of debate. Do you guys all have the handout there? You guys all have it? Yeah, and do you all have the handout, all 3 pages of the handout?
Yes.
There should be 3 pages. Yeah, here's the other pages. So can you make sure they all get the 3 pages there? It's a 3-page handout. 3-page. See the numbers at the bottom? 3-page.
This one's 01. I got a 1. I got a 1.
Okay, how are we doing, Brandon? Good.
I have 3. Okay, I need a 4 6. Here's a 6. Maybe 4. No, she is already 6.
Okay, let's go. All right, ladies, let's get started. Okay, here we go. So the 3 pillars of debate. That's what we're going to talk about. These are called the fundamentals of debate. These are your 3 essential skills that you need to master in order to be an effective debater. On your handout there, you see these letters, right? Everybody look at the page 1 with me. A-R-E. It's under page 1. If you look at the bottom of your numbering, it's page 1 of the handout. A-R-E. What does the A-R-E stand for? Anybody know?
Assertion.
That's assertion? Yeah. Okay. What's the R?
Reason.
Assertion.
I don't know. I think I'm just.
Reason. Okay. And evidence.
Look at those.
What's the explanation point? This one's looking better. Anybody know what this means? Impact. Exclamation point is my shorthand for the word impact. So these are the fundamental elements of an argument. And as we're going to see in this lecture, it's important that we master all three of the pillars that we're going to go through. But the first pillar we're going to look at, pillar number 1 on your handout, is the assertion, reason, and evidence. It's page 1 of the handout. It's that page right there, buddy. And what you want to know is assertion, reason, evidence, and impact are the 4 most important elements of an argument. This is also known as the Toulmin model by Professor Toulmin. And what the 3 pillars of debate are going to tell us is that all 3 of these pillars go together. Go together. So assertion, reason, evidence, impact, and the 4 responses to any argument, and then 5-point refutation are the 3 pillars. You know, I told you guys, how many of you heard the story of my first triathlon race, right? All right, my first triathlon, right? How does a triathlon work? What does it have? It has 3 sports, right? You have your running, your cycling, and your swimming, okay? In my first triathlon, I had worked on all 3 of those legs of the race, right? That in a triathlon, you have 3 legs of the race. I had to practice and develop each one of those. But in my first triathlon, I really neglected the swimming portion, right? And the swimming is the last leg of a sprint triathlon that they did in Redlands. And what I had to learn the hard way is that when you neglect one of the legs of a triathlon, it will make you feel very bad when you are splashing in a swimming pool and you can't finish. And so it's important that when we look at the 3 pillars of debate today that we know each one of them, because all 3 are going to go together and help us to become more effective debaters. And that in order for us to effectively compete at tournaments, we need to be able to do all 3 of these. So pillar number 1, the first pillar is assertion, reason, evidence, and impact. And if you look at the example I gave you, we're using the example again of dogs versus cats. How many of you are cat lovers? Any cat lovers here? How many of you are dog lovers?
I'm also a dog lover.
Okay, well, if you were to have a debate over which pet is the better pet, should we love our cats more than our dogs, or our dogs more than our cats? If we were going to have a debate about that, we wanted to make arguments that made our side the stronger side. And if we're on the side of dogs, like I'm kind of a dog guy myself, I need to give you some reasons and some evidence, because if I just give you an assertion, is that an argument? No. So please write next to the assertion, write the words, not an argument. An assertion alone is not an argument. Unfortunately, though, many homeschool students, many high school students, make the mistake of believing that an assertion is an argument, that it's a response, that you can make an argument simply by making an assertion. Like it's just like by saying, well, dogs are better because they are. I don't know why, but they are. They just are, right? Is that an argument? No. Or dogs are better, they have fur. Is that an argument? No, because cats have fur too, right? So it doesn't become an argument until we start giving a reason and an evidence to support our argument, right? Now, if I give you a reason like this, well, dogs are a better pet because they can protect you from a home intruder, right? Like nobody puts up a sign on their fence that says, beware of cats, right? And it's like this picture of a cat with like fangs or something like, hey, you break into my house, I'm grabbing Fluffy and I'm throwing him on you. Get him, Fluffy, go, and Fluffy's gonna scratch you and it's gonna be bad, right? Like nobody cares. You don't ever hear like cats, fending off robbers or something like that, right? But according to a correctional study that was done, of inmates, a survey of over 300 prison inmates who had been convicted of burglary or residential crimes, 65% of them said that a dog of a good size would be a deterrent for burglarizing that home. 65% admitted that. What is that? Well, that's evidence. Right? What am I talking about there? There's evidence then to support that the reason why the dogs are a more preferable pet is because the evidence supports my reason, right? And the evidence says, according to a study done of potential criminals or actually convicted criminals, they're less likely to burglarize a home if there's a dog of a good size. So what's the impact then? What's the word impact mean? Why it matters, right? Why it matters. Why it matters. So a reason is something that supports your assertion. So if my assertion is what? That dogs are a better pet than cats. Okay, you guys track this with me now. So write this out with me. You have it below on your handout there, room to write this. So if my assertion is that dogs are better than cats, and my reason is because dogs, right? My reason would be because dogs can prevent, prevent a home intrusion, can prevent your home from being burglarized, right? Dogs are uniquely able to prevent burglars from coming into your house, or they deter burglars from coming in, thieves from coming into your house, right? And I use the example of like the sign, how dogs, how there's signs that say beware of dogs, right? I mean, maybe my only favorite sign over that one would be the picture of the gun. Have you guys seen that sign? It says, never mind the dog, beware of owner, and it shows like this, was it like a Magnum 44 handgun or something? And it's like, forget the dog, I got the handgun, Maybe that's a better one. But my reason would be that dogs, can prevent you from home intrusion. My evidence then is something like this. What's our 3 forms of evidence? Let's get this down quickly. Our evidence forms are going to take the shape of one of these 3 things, right? It's either going to be something like stats, right? Or it's going to be history. Let me get another pen here. History. What has history shown to be true? Or it's going to be what the experts say. The expert opinions, right? So our evidence really take those 3 forms. Either it's like stats, figures, numbers, percentages, what's the study, or what history has shown to be true, right? Historical evidence. For example, if you're having a debate about the use of nuclear weapons and the opposing side was saying, well, no one ever would use a nuclear weapon. How might you disprove that with history?
America used a nuclear weapon.
When did we use them?
Hiroshima.
Right, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, right? Those bombs, right, represented the use of nuclear force, let alone many nuclear tests. So the propensity, history tells us, there is evidence that suggests they could be used, and there's a probability, right? How about expert opinions? This is what the expert says on the particular field that we're discussing, right? Okay, so those are our 3 forms of evidence. The evidence I just read you about the survey done, which form is that? Yeah, it's stats, right? Like I'm telling you the percentage, 65%, right? Everybody follow that? So far, so good? You guys tracking with me? Okay, so then what's the impact? The impact is why the argument matters. Why does it matter? Well, why does it matter that a dog can prevent you from a home invasion, a home intrusion? Well, that could potentially save your life, protect your property, right? So my impact is going to tell me, just why it matters. And in this case, if my assertion is that dogs, right, dogs are better than cats, so dogs over cats, dogs are the better, right, better pet. Why does that matter? Well, dogs could save your life, save life. And there's probably other arguments like this that I could construct, right? Like if you're buried in an avalanche, right, they're not going to airdrop in a bunch of cats for you, right? The cats aren't going to like rummage in the snow and try to find your buried body. That's not going to happen, right? Like after 9/11, I don't know if you guys have seen the video of like the rubble and everything on the ground. They didn't like send in all these cats to like go through all of the destruction and waste and material. Like no, they use dogs. They use special dogs. Have you guys ever seen like the bomb sniffing dogs in the airports, right? I have, like in Dallas, Texas, they have these dogs, and they'll come and sniff your luggage and stuff. Well, they don't have cats for that. I've never seen them like take cats around and like you're coming through the TSA agent tells you go over there. We have a cat that wants to sniff you, and that cat comes and like rubs your leg or something, and it can tell. Like no, it doesn't work that way, right? It doesn't work that way. Dogs are uniquely used in this capacity, right? So does that mean there aren't good responses? No. But this means is that I'm making now a logical argument. Something I want you guys to distinguish. Sometimes new debaters, we make the mistake of believing that when we bicker with someone, we're doing an academic argument. No, academic arguments is very different than bickering, okay? Here's the difference. So bickering, when you bicker with someone, I don't really know how to spell it, but I think it's like B-I-C-K-E-R or something. Bickering is my own opinion, right? When I bicker with someone, I want my own way, right? Where an argument, the big difference here between what an actual argument is based on reason, not mere opinion. So let's say, we were talking, you overheard a newlywed couple about what kind of drapes they should have in their home, right? And the guy's like, I want camouflage drapes. I want my, camouflage and maybe little Uzi symbols on them or something. And I want camouflage military drapes in my home, right? And the wife's like, no, I want pink drapes, right? She's like, I want pink. And he's like, no, I want, and they're just going back and forth. Well, that's a bickering over their opinion, right? Maybe there's a compromise they can come to where it's like pink camouflage or something, like pink camouflage, I don't know. But the point is, bickering over something is only based on opinion. But what we want to do is we want to reason out our ideas. We want to give reasons to support our arguments. So let's flip to the next page. Page number 2 on your handout there. Page number 2. Look down at the bottom. What is the minimum thing that every argument must have? There's 2 things. What is the 2 things that an argument must have at a minimum to be an argument? What are the 2 things? Absolutely. It's an assertion and a reason. The 2 things you got to have is assertion and reason. At a minimum, we don't make a logical argument until we have, at a minimum, these 2 things right here, 1 and 2. Assertion and reason. So in that first space there, you want to write, at a minimum, every argument has to assert something and has to have at least a reason to support it, whatever it is, right? If you want to argue that, the use of drones is bad, well, it doesn't become an argument until you start telling me something like because they could be, hacked by Al-Qaeda operatives, or because they, deny someone due process because they're just, assassinating people with these drones rather than arresting them and, giving them a prison tribunal or something like a military tribunal. Instead, we're just firing missiles and blowing up terrorists and stuff, okay? Well, that would be, now you're at least giving me an assertion with reason to it. You got to give me some sort of because, right? Like if you want your mom, if your name's, Victoria, and you're like, hey, I need new clothes, right? And you go to your mom and you're like, Mom, I need clothes, right? And she's like, well, why do you need new clothes? And you're just to say, well, because I need them. I just do, okay? I just want them, right? Well, that may be your opinion, and you guys may bicker about that, but that's not an argument. It doesn't become an argument until you start giving it some sort of reason. Instead, if Victoria was to go to her mother and say, Mom, I'm suffering from low self-esteem, okay? And I recently was reading in the study on American youth and adolescent health that was published by Loma Linda University. It stated that in 2014, young teenage girls who suffer from low self-esteem are far more likely to turn to drugs and alcohol abuse. And I don't want to do that, Mother. So please, for the love of mercy, I need new clothes, which according to this study could elevate my self-esteem and self-outlook. So save me from a life of crime and violence. New clothes, right? Now, at least she's making an argument, right? Now she's giving a reason to support her assertion that she needs new clothes, right? Do you understand? That's where the real debate begins to take place. Can I make this argument without evidence? Absolutely, right? Now, is it better if I have evidence? Absolutely. So the evidence is always going to trump non-evidence, right? I mean, unless the argument is so obviously true, evidence is always going to be the tiebreaker. Does that make sense? Like if you're trying to convince me something that seems, You know, like if you're trying to tell me, I don't know, like 9/11 was an inside job, and you're like, it's a conspiracy, it's all conspiracy. Well, even with your evidence, if your evidence, is biased, it's probably not going to be enough to overcome what seemed obviously true to me. Does that make sense? So evidence only goes so far, but generally, evidence is going to be preferred to non-evidence. Does that make sense? So always evidence is very important. And then impact. Why do we impact our arguments? Why? Because that's what gives us the credit for the argument. It tells the judge, listen, it tells the judge not only why it matters, but what it means. What it means. Does that make sense? So write those words down. What it means. With impacting, it also goes into what it means. Okay. The last part on page 2 is the 3 forms of persuasion. We need to know all 3 of these. What are the 3 forms of persuasion? They are ethos, logos, pathos. What do they all mean? Let's go through them quickly. Ethos is your credibility. Your credibility. Okay? Now, you're just a young, 14, 15-year-old kid. Do you have a lot of credibility? Not necessarily, but how do you gain it? How do you improve your credibility? What do you think?
More evidence.
Evidence, absolutely. Evidence is definitely a key to credibility. So evidence is something we want to use there, right? But how about this? How about just carrying yourself with dignity and respect? Do you think that matters, right? I mean, just think hypothetically. You have a judge who sees you out in the parking lot bickering with your parents about your lack of new clothes, okay? Or they didn't get you the latest video game for Christmas, or something other ridiculous that I've heard homeschool kids, the types of things anyways, I've heard them bicker with their parents about. Do you think that impacts the credibility that you have when that judge sees you later at the tournament? Do you think so? Absolutely. So carrying yourself with dignity and respect, the way you control your emotions and the way you handle yourself and the way you treat other people, that all goes to your ethos as well. Okay? How about your logos? What's the logos?
Logic.
It's the logic, right? How do we improve our logic? There's 2 things that we do, right? Really 2 big things that will improve our logic. It's the reasoning, obviously how good we reason out our ideas. How well we explain our reasons, what our reasons are. That is huge to our logos. And it's avoiding logical fallacies. And I gave you guys a lecture all about logical fallacies last semester. You can go back and watch that. But logic is really the reasons or the warrant for our ideas. And then pathos. Pathos is an extremely important one. Listen, particularly for community judges. The less trained your judge is, the more pathos is going to matter. Because pathos is largely what your speaker points and other things are going to be on. And what is pathos? It's your emotional appeal. How likable of a speaker you are. I mean, are you putting emotion into the words that you say, right? Like, if you're talking about something that matters, but you say it in a very non-emotional way, do you think that affects your pathos? Absolutely, right? Like I told you guys this story last semester about the girl who had the bad habit of laughing when she was talking about really sad things. You guys remember the story? Remember like the girl and it was like about the babies being like abandoned on the side of the road? And she just started, she's like, oh, and the babies, they're left on the side of the road to die. And she's laughing. And like you guys are laughing now. And it's like, oh my gosh, don't you have a soul? Don't you have a soul? That's what you want to ask. And that's your pathos, right? But at the same time, what if you're just totally boring, right? What if you are like, you put no emotion into the things you say? Do you think that matters? Like if I was to deliver this lecture in the most monotone tone ever, if I'm like, assertion, reason, evidence, impact, blah, 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 blah. That's ridiculous, right? That's not going to draw your attention in. That's not going to keep you engaged with the lecture. No, it's important that we use pathos. The emotion is correct with the argument that we're making. It doesn't mean we need to be like serious the whole time or that we need to be funny the whole time, but that we need the right emotion for the right argument. Does that make sense? So it's all about having the right emotion at the right time. That's your pathos. All right, the three forms of evidence we've already touched on. Let's go over to page number 4. We'll call this pillar number 2. I'm going to rotate this around for pillar number 2.
Do you mean 3?
No. Page number 4 is pillar number 2. 4 responses to any argument. It's on page number 4.
No, we skipped 3.
Page number 4. No, we're going to get to pillar number 3. It's coming. Do you still see it? Everything okay? We're good? Okay. All right. So pillar number 2 is the 4 responses to any argument. This is P2, pillar number 2, and it's the 4 responses. 4 responses. Let's look at response number 1. What's one of the ways we can answer arguments? Okay, so we've established first that we need to make good logical arguments. We've established what an argument looks like. Now let's talk about ways to respond to them. There was a debate round I was in was essentially my junior year. And I was debating this team from Berkeley, and they ran an argument that I just had no idea what to say. I mean, have you ever been there? Has someone made an argument and you're just totally blanking on what to say? Man, that's happened to me. And I just remembered there was 20 some arguments, and for 19 of them, I had really good responses. But for one, I couldn't answer. There was one I couldn't answer. And so I dropped that one argument, okay? Well, it was a 5-judge panel, and 3 of the judges vote against us. We lost that round. And we lost this important playoff out round because of one argument that I couldn't answer. And it wasn't that I didn't want to answer it, and it wasn't that I didn't see it, and I just missed it on the flow. No, I caught it. I just didn't know what to say. And so one of the judges told me afterwards, words I'll never forget, and words that I've incorporated in this lecture, and now that I'm passing on to you, ones you want to apply. And it's that there are always, and as she told me, there are always 4 potential responses to any argument. You never have to just drop the argument without saying anything. You can always say something. It doesn't mean it's going to be a great response, and it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to win that argument. But what you don't have to do, and what doesn't have to happen, is you never have to just drop an argument with nothing to say. You always have something to say. The first thing, and the first reason I know this is true, is the first response we can make to any argument. We can agree. We can agree. We can have an agreeing response. In other words, if they're saying hey, there are children dying of malaria in Africa, you don't have to come up and be well, they're just African children, darn those, malaria is such a good character building, and they're just African children, so you just got to let them have, no, again, I'm going to be don't you, on your ballot, I'm going to be writing, may the Lord have mercy on your soul, but this ballot won't, baby, and I'm going to be writing that in there, because I'm going to be that's a horrible argument, right? And yet I've heard very similar arguments from our homeschool community of people being well, they're not Americans, so it's somehow their lives, that's only African human life we're talking about. It's not American human life, so let those children suffer with that malaria, I'm come on. But what do we want to do? We can't just agree with everything they say either, though, right? So what do we typically want to do if we agree with someone?
Outweigh.
We want to outweigh. So it's agreement plus outweigh. And what does outweigh mean? Outweigh simply means that there is some other reason, even though this argument is true, what they're saying, we still win the debate. So in other words, if they're saying, hey, children are dying of malaria in Africa, I can agree with them that is happening, but I can outweigh that reason with an argument that says, even though it's true, children are dying of malaria in Africa, we still outweigh because using the United Nations to solve this problem would only make matters worse. And we have a couple of arguments for why that's true. So elsewhere in the debate, I would need to have set forth that the United Nations is bad. Okay? That the United Nations has fundamental flaws, that about 90% of the money that goes to the United Nations gets spent on bureaucracy and red tape. There's not a humanitarian organization in the world that could justify the budget of the United Nations and stay in business. But I give you a government bureaucracy that's funded by US taxpayer money, and they get away with it. They get away with it. Moreover, they have a history of rampant corruption, such as the oil for food scandal, where about $40 billion got misallocated to people like Saddam Hussein, and he used that money to buy weapons to oppress the very people it was meant to go and save. The United Nations. Moreover, there's been a history, and an own internal report showed that the UN peacekeepers and those sent to help people in devastated communities have been, I don't know what else to tell you, but child abusers have been, unfortunately, there's been poor screening process of UN peacekeepers in the past, and they've harmed the very people they've been sent in to help. So although it's true children are dying of malaria in Africa, we outweigh because using the United Nations is a really bad idea to try to help that problem. How about that? Does that make sense? Do you see how I could agree and outweigh? I don't have to disagree with everything. I make smart responses, but I don't have to just drop the response either, drop the argument, right? So they make the argument, children are dying of malaria. I can agree with that, but I give them a reason to outweigh. Does that make sense? Man, grasp this. You guys apply this, it's going to improve your odds of winning. Number 2, what I call mitigation. Mitigation. What does mitigation mean? Essentially it means to lessen. Debaters often overstate the importance of their argument. They often say things like, if we stop, selling lobster to China, they're going to nuke us. Like they're going to wake up and they're going to be what? There's no lobster coming from the US, nuke, baby. And they start launching missiles. And I'm only exaggerating a little bit, but this is the type of arguments I've heard homeschool debaters, like they love the idea that things will end in nuclear war. I don't know what it is. It's like we have a bunch of nihilists among us who are like, hey, how can we get like nuclear holocaust out of ending the lobster trade with China? That's where it's got to go. So a mitigation response isn't necessarily to deny the truth of their argument that China would be upset. It's just to say, it's to bring it back to reality and say, no, it's not nearly that bad. Or it's not nearly as good even as you're claiming. It's to lessen whatever the importance of their argument is. It's to say, really what this is kind of saying is that they have no real impact. Do you understand? In evidence, listen, in evidence cards, this is where they leave out the words like it may, or it can, or has happened on some times. It's where they've made the evidence card to sound absolute, and you bring up the qualifier in your next speech. You come up and, like when they say, look, our plan will save 100 lives, and really the evidence says the plan has a slight potential of saving 100 lives. Does that make sense? I would bring up the words, the slight potential that they left out. You bring up those kind of words and you've mitigated, you've taken away the impact of their argument, essentially. Does that make sense? You're mitigating the effectiveness of their argument. Number 3, deny. Deny. It's the most obvious response in a debate round. What does deny mean?
Nope.
It's completely not true. It's to say it's completely not true. So it means, it's just saying that's not true. And it doesn't mean that the other team is lying. It's not like you're saying, oh, you're lying. No, it's just saying, look, history denies that that's true, right? They said that there's no way we'd ever use nuclear weapons. World War II disproves that. That's empirically denied, right? Or they're arguing that, according to their evidence, that the CIA is not violating anyone's personal privacy at this time, right? But we have evidence that says that's not true, that they have been doing warrantless wiretaps on people, right? It's to deny the truth of their argument. So if they're claiming CIA isn't currently abusing its power, and you read evidence to the contrary, you're saying, look, that's not true. Does that make sense? You're denying the truth of their argument. Going back to the dogs versus cat analogy, right? If there's to say, well, cats are just as useful of a pet as dogs are, but if I've set out other reasons why dogs are uniquely better that they haven't answered, then I can deny the truth of their argument that says cats are just as useful or cats are more useful, right? I'm saying, no, it's not true, right? Or if they've made the argument that dogs cost more than cats, but when you factor in the benefits of dogs, that it comes out to about the same, I could say, look, their argument that cats cost less than dogs is not true when you consider the other benefits like home security that dogs give you over cats. Because of that unique benefit, depending on the size of the dog, the average dog can cost about the same amount. Something like that. Does that make sense? So there would be a reason to deny the truth of their argument. That's what we're talking about. The fourth response you can make potentially to any argument, and it's not that you can use all four of these at the same time, but it's that one of these four is always potentially available to you. Does that make sense? And it's not that these are the only four ways to make the arguments. There's a lot of different responses, but think of these as like the four category of responses. Does that make sense? The four categories of responses. Now we're to the fourth one, which is the turn. To turn the argument. And what the turn essentially means, it's to capture the argument. It's to capture or to say the opposite. Opposite is true. The opposite is true. That's really what the fourth response really is. It's to turn the opponent's argument and to capture it. Like how many of you are football fans, right? We got one, at least, over here. He's got his Broncos sweater on, all that. Oh, we got another one over here. Who do you like? Who's your team? USC, okay. All right, yeah, I'm actually a USC fan too. But let's say, I didn't watch too many of the playoff games, but let's say the team you're rooting for, they intercept a pass from the opponent, and then they run it in for a touchdown. What they've essentially done is they've captured their opponent's thing, that football that they intended to score with, and they've scored with it. And essentially what this is saying, when you turn an opponent's argument, you're essentially capturing it, and you're now making it a reason for you to win that round. Does that make sense? So a capture response would sound something like this. It's to say, when they say that our plan to build a wall across the southern border would be an incredibly waste of money, I'm going to argue a turn on that argument. I'm going to say, look, they claim that building a wall across the United States southern border would cost us billions of dollars and be a waste of money. I think the opposite is actually true. I think the wall, in the long run, would save us a lot of money. How could I give you evidence of that? Yes, I would say things like, look, the average cost to pursue, arrest, arraign, detain, try, and incarcerate an illegal criminal, someone who's coming here to sell guns or sell drugs or do human trafficking, is $100,000 per person. $100,000 it costs a criminal justice U.S. taxpayer money to arrest these people. That's a lot of money. That ends up being billions of dollars. Then consider the societal cost of the drug and weapons distributions and the human trafficking that's taking place. The billions of dollars we spend in welfare and things like that for the illegal immigrants, right? Now, I'm not saying there aren't also benefits, but if the argument is that building a wall across the southern border it would be an extremely waste of money, then my response, no, turn. Actually, it would save the United States a lot of money in the long run because of all the decrease in crime and all of the decrease of capturing and imprisoning all of the potential criminals that come across the southern border. According to one study, 1 out of every 10 people who come across the southern border have either committed a felony or are wanted for felonies here in the United States. 1 out of every 10. And you consider that about 1 million, hundreds of thousands of people cross the southern border, up to 1 million every year. That's a lot of criminal activity taking place on our southern border. Building a wall, if their best argument is your plan wastes a lot of money, my turn response says no, actually my plan will save us a lot of money in the long run. We'll stop all of that trafficking, not to mention the human trafficking that takes place and the societal cost of having, your young daughter ripped from your home in Phoenix, Arizona, and you never see him again because she's been taken to South America. That's a huge societal cost. My response then is saying, look, it is far better for society's cost if we pass our plan and build a wall on the southern border. Do you see how powerful that is? That means their argument, I may never have brought up the idea of cost, but their argument now becomes a reason for me to win the debate round. Does that make sense? That's what a good turn response does. Here's the idea I want you guys to get. These first three responses, please write off to the side. These are defensive. This is defense. This is all defense. These are all saying, I don't lose. That's what these say. These say, I don't lose. On whatever their argument is, when I've made this response, I'm saying, I don't lose. But here I'm doing something radically different. Here we have offense. We have the offense. This is saying, I win. In other words, in my rebuttal, it's going to sound something like this. Judge, if you believe that cost matters, you would only vote for my plan to build a wall on the southern border because our plan would save us billions of dollars in the long run by stopping all of the criminal activity coming across our southern border, by stopping the cost of the $100,000 per illegal criminal that comes across, by saving all of the prison costs, by saving all of the societal cost of the harms of drug use and weapons and things flooding into our country from the southern border. That is the cost our plan is saving. So if cost matters to you, Judge, you would only vote for my plan. Do you think I'm going to win that debate? I mean, if that's their best argument, I hope they got something better. You know what I'm saying? I mean, at least with the judging pool that we have, I think I'm probably going to win 90+% of those rounds making a response like that. Even if I never mentioned even if I never mentioned the argument of cost in my first speech, their argument that my plan costs money, if I've effectively turned it, now becomes a reason for me to win. Does that make sense, you guys? All right. Put this into your brain. You got to memorize this. Whenever someone runs a response tonight that you don't know how to answer, I want you to go through this list and say, hey, what are the arguments I want to make? What's the order that I should go in the list? Here's the order I want to go. I mean, at least as a more talent, the better you get, you want to go this order. I want to go this direction, meaning I want to try to turn their argument if I can. If I can give an offensive reason to reject their argument, I'm probably not going to lose on that argument. Does that make sense? If I have a good reason. Now, all of these are really based on how good your reason and evidence is. So keep this in mind. Your response, how good your response is determined on how good your reason and evidence, how good this is. That's what's going to determine which one of these is awesome. The best argument is the ones that have the best reason and evidence to support them. Does that make sense? Because as we saw on the other side, it's our assertion, reason, evidence, and impacts that matter. And what I'm essentially telling you to do with these four responses is keep that in mind and say, whichever one of these I can put good reason and evidence into, that's going to be my best argument. Okay? Which brings me to my last pillar. You guys got all this? Are we good? Got that? Let's go to the next page. Page number 5. Page number 5. Page number 5 is the 5 points of 5-point refutation. The 5 points of 5-point refutation. This is also known as pillar number 3. You may have heard this as 4-point refutation. I call it 5 points because I'll explain in a second. I call it 5 points because after hearing a lot of rounds, I think it makes more sense to you guys if you think about these as 5 specific steps. Let's go through the 5 together. This is how we refute someone in a debate round. Remember, there's a lot of different arguments that are given in a debate round. What 4-point or 5-point refutation is going to allow us to do is precisely identify which of our opponent's argument we're responding to and giving a very specific response in response to their argument. It's what allows the judge to flow our arguments. Do you guys remember the lecture we had on flowing? Well, this is how we utilize words to tell the judge how to take notes correctly. Does that make sense? 5-point refutation is going to use the first 2 pillars as its support for constructing refutation, for refuting arguments. That's where it's going to be done. Let's look at the 5 steps together. Step number 1 is identify where the argument was made. Where? The where is very important. So in team policy, you might say under their, under their advantage, under their advantages, right? Or under their, or harms, or their, under their background points. Or if they're just presenting a case of like, that has, like 3 contentions, you might identify the specific contention, especially for LD debaters. For LD debaters, it's going to be like contention driven. Their first contention is going to be like their value is the highest value. Their second contention is going to be like, here's why my side of the resolution is true based on my value. And their third contention might be, your value isn't as good as my value, or your side of the topic isn't as good as mine. Something like that. Well, you need to identify where that argument was made for the judge so they know specifically how to flow it, how to see where you're at on the flow. This is such an important step. That's why I split the first 2, a 4-point refutation, into 2 points. By making it clear to you guys that you got to be specific where the argument was made. So by where, I'm really talking about the structure. What was used, the sub-point 1. Was it a contention? Was it a advantage? Something like this, something that is signpost what the argument was and which one it was. So the where is telling us specifically where in the debate the argument was made. Who made it? Where was it from? Is it a disadvantage? Is it disadvantage number 3? Is it disadvantage number 4? Is it the topicality argument? Where was the argument made? And then number 2 is the what. Is the what. This is what was said. What did they say? Did they say you were off topic? Did they say your plan cost too much money? Did they say their value is the highest value? What was said? What is the gist of what they said? You don't need to give us a big explanation, but it's no more than 1 sentence here. It's just a sentence that says, here's what they said. They said that, children are dying of malaria in Africa. That was their argument. This is what they said, right? Both of these are really important. In traditional 4-point refutation, this is step 1. But in my version, I broke it into 2 steps because you really need to do both. You need both the where and you need the what. Where did they say the argument and what did they say in order to effectively organize your arguments? One of the things you see the judges have on their ballots is organization. One of the ways to improve your organization is by doing correct 5-point refutation. One of the other big things judges look at is how effectively you refuted responses. Well, in order for them to give you credit for your refutation, for using one of these 4 responses, is you got to be precise where you want them to give you that credit. You got to tell them where the argument was made and what was said. So if you're in the 1AC or the 2AC, or it's your second affirmative speech in LD, your 1AR, you need to be able to identify which response you're responding to. So you might say, under our contention 2, they said that we had no evidence to support our argument. Actually, as we're going to see, we do have evidence, and we'll go in and refute it that way. But the where and the what sets the stage for which argument you're specifically responding to or which response. Does that make sense? So it's which part of their case or which response that you're refuting. It's either a case argument like a contention or an advantage, or it's a response. It's a specific response. But you still have to identify where the response was made and what was said. Okay? Let's go to number 3. Almost done. We got 3 more points to get through and then we're done. Number 3 is where you give your counter assertion. Your counter assertion. This is where you say something like, that's not true, or I agree and outweigh, or I mitigate, or I deny their argument, or turn. Here's how our plan actually saves money. It's where you're giving one of those 4 types of responses. That's your counter assertion. Now, does it have to just be one of those 4? No, there's all sorts of ways to make a counter assertion. It may simply be like, my evidence says this, or there's no scenario, no impact, empirically denied, non-unique, no scenario. There's all sorts of different ways for you to construct a counter assertion. Does that make sense? But the point is that you have one, that you have some sort of counter statement that says, here's what I'm about to say, the argument I'm about to prove. So if we were having a debate about what's better, cats versus dogs, and they've made 4 arguments about why cats are better, I would say under their third argument that cats are better because they always land on their feet. So under their third argument, they argue that cats are better because they always land on their feet. I'm going to counter that and say that's not true. I duct taped my cat's legs together. And no, don't do that. Don't do that. But I'm sure there's a way you could probably disprove that hypothesis, right? The cat's legs, I don't know. That's probably mean. Don't test that out. I don't want angry calls. I'm not suggesting people go home and duct tape their cat's legs just to test this. I'm just saying that there's probably a counter assertion that could be made, okay? Excuse me. So the counter assertion. This is our third step. Our fourth step is then to provide reason and support, which would include what, if we have it? What would be our support? Evidence, right? So we'd read evidence or reasons in support of what our counter assertion says. Does that make sense? So if their argument was that under their third disadvantage, they said that building a wall on the southern border would cost way too much money, my counter assertion is no, my plan would save money. My reason and support for this is the study that was done on the illegal criminals coming across our southern border, that it costs us about $100,000 per person, and we're spending over something like, let's say, $10 billion a year or more on hunting them down and arresting them and incarcerating them and putting them through our criminal justice system. That's costing us about $10 billion. Let's say I had evidence that supported that. I'm kind of throwing that number out there. It's probably not too far off, actually. But let's say it was somewhere in that ballpark. Well, I would read that evidence here in support of my counter assertion that it actually would save money. Does that make sense? That's my counter assertion. Then that brings me to my fifth and final point, which is the impact. The why it matters. Well, why does that matter? Well, if you are concerned about saving money, if money is your driving force, then you would only vote for my plan because in the long run, it's going to pay off when we decrease the amount of criminal activity coming into our nation. Does that make sense? So let's go through these 5 steps together now. The where is the identifying where the opponent made the argument. The what is what they said about that. The third point is your counter statement, your counter assertion. The fourth point is your reason and support for that counter statement. And your fifth point is the impact. Now let's put this together. Do all 3 pillars go together? Do all 3 pillars that I've taught you here so far, do they all go together? Yes. Do you see that this, let's look at the ARE. Look at pillar number 1 with me. Where would we put the A? Where does the A go? The assertion goes right here next to number 3, right? Where does the reason and evidence go? On number 4, you put the R and the E right here. Where does the impact go? The exclamation point. Right here, okay? How about pillar number 2? Where would we put pillar number 2 on 5-point refutation? Where would we put this? Well, if we're going to pick one of these 4 responses, all of these are also going to be inserted right here at step number 3. Our counter assertions are going to be based off of one of these 4 responses. Does that make sense? Listen, all of the responses that people are going to come up with in a debate round have to fit in one of these 4 categorical responses. Like there's nothing else mathematically, right? Because you're either going to agree and outweigh, or you're going to mitigate, or you're going to deny, or you're going to turn. There really isn't anything else on the mathematical spectrum scale in the way that you can respond and refute someone. Like the best debaters in the world, take William Lane Craig, someone like that. All they're going to do is just do these really, really well. They're just going to have better evidence, better reason. They're going to persuade you in a more dynamic way with their communication skills. But it's all just really using these 3 pillars at the highest level. This is how you can become a black belt, by mastering these 3 things and really developing your performance and the way you deliver them but also really having good research, good reason and evidence. That's how you do it. And there isn't anything else. It certainly, your charisma as a speaker certainly matters. Your communication as a speaker certainly matters. But do you see, if you master these three things and you put these into practice, you will become a better debater, I guarantee it. And so in closing, we're going to just do a little drill with those here in this room. We're just going to do a little drill together. I'm going to have you guys practice this drill using these three pillars now with the hypothesis of dogs are better than cats. And the way we're going to do it is we're going to put you into groups of three. And one person is going to be for the dogs, the next person is going to be for the cats, and the next person is going to be for the dogs, and then it's going to come back to the other person who started, and they're now going to be for the cats. You see? And we're just going to go through, and we're going to make sure we identify what our opponent said, give a counter assertion, provide reason, and if we can think of some sort of evidence for it, and then impact. For the purpose of this drill, we're really focusing on what they said. They're giving a counter assertion, reason, evidence, and impact. Does that make sense? Okay, well with that then, that's going to conclude this portion of the lecture. I'd like to thank our online preview community for joining us. We will be doing these talks and lectures more every week. We have them at Mondays at 6 p.m., but we always upload them within 24 hours. And so we hope that many of you will join us as well.
And the link to join up is in the description below in the video.
And the link to join up is in the description below in the video. Thank you guys so much.